Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I would give my top 3 tips for route planning. So route planning is a really useful thing to do if you're doing both a long and a short walk. It allows you to work out if you've got enough time in the day, maybe if the weather is going to change or whether you're going to run out of light, say in the winter when it gets darker a lot earlier, to ensure you've got enough water and food in your backpack. Also to make sure that you're not making it up as you go along and actually maybe you didn't foresee something might be quite tricky if you're just sort of trying to go along and follow a path without really studying the route and knowing some potential challenges ahead of time. My first tip is to get inspiration. When you're looking at a map, you might see different paths, but you might not necessarily know what goes together well, what is an enjoyable route, what matches your ability, what time you might have. So I would really recommend looking at a range of resources. This can be YouTube, including creators such as Athena Miller, make really good sort of inspirational videos. I also have her guidebook, the Ramble Guides. She has one on the Peak District and the Lake District, which I would highly recommend. There are also websites, I think Muddy Boots might be one, and also other guidebooks as well. So I've just mentioned one there, but I often use this one on High Lakeland Fells by Bob Allen. But other companies do them, such as Lonely Planet, and my other favourite, particularly for the Lake District, is Alfred Wainwright Pictorial Guides to the Lakeland Fells. I think there are new editions now in paperback which are quite easy to get hold of in places like Booths in Cumbria and the Lake District, but these hardback ones can be found in second-hand shops, although they are being collected. So if you can get your hands on one of it and you do like them, then I would also recommend. They've got these lovely little drawings of the surrounding area, potential routes, and they're not necessarily loads of depth, but they give you a sort of rough idea of maybe what a particular path might be like. But I would definitely supplement these with a map or maybe an additional guidebook that goes into some more depth. So these resources can give ideas, they can detail the terrain, they can highlight anything that might be particularly difficult or challenging. They'll also refer to how long it takes. It's definitely worth bearing in mind your speed against what their potential speed could be. For example, if someone is a very experienced mountaineer, it's likely that they're going to be going quite fast. I would find that my descent always takes a lot longer than I think it's going to take, so I always try to factor that in when I'm reading someone's descent, and they make it sound quite quick and I realise it's probably going to take me a fair while longer. I recently used one of the resources that I mentioned, the High Lakeland Fells guidebook, whilst planning a route up Blencathra. Personally, I prefer a route that is circular, so your ascent and descent is different. This just helps ensure variety and different views potentially, but sometimes it's not always the best option to have a circular route, and it is safer and more efficient to go up and down the same route, potentially if the weather changes or you're just sort of unsure of the alternative routes available. This guidebook shared the same opinion, that it was more preferable to do a different ascent and descent. So it was very useful to use the guidebook to get an understanding of the different routes and the different complexities that the routes required. I was with a group of people who hadn't necessarily had that much mountain experience before, so wanted to ensure that the route wasn't too difficult but still be enjoyable, and as I said, not go up and down the same way. So we decided to go for Halls Ridge, and this is a slightly easier route than Sharp Edge, which definitely in wet weather can be important to take precaution. Our weather was phenomenal, so we really didn't have that much concern that there would be slippy rock or high winds, so the route was definitely made easier by the fact that the weather was really good. It's always a humbling reminder when you see a fell runner running down a route that you're struggling to climb up. So it was definitely worth researching that beforehand, because I probably wouldn't have gone up that route had I not read about it previously. So I would definitely do that route again based on reading of the guidebook. It is worth bearing in mind and saying at this point that also different guidebook writers have different preferences of what they enjoy. For example, the guidebook that I just sort of referenced, the mountaineer who wrote the book really likes a little bit of a scramble and often judges walks based on how good the scramble is. So if you are not that comfortable with scrambling, or you are with people who may not necessarily have had any experience, I think it's definitely worth bearing in mind how a guidebook writer is writing and what they enjoy and what they would recommend as being a good route. In comparison, the Ramble Guides with Athena Meller, she does a fabulous job of grading the routes in a way that I think is quite accessible and recognises that you may have children, or you may not have that much time in the day and you just want a really enjoyable walk, but you don't necessarily want to be going up a mountain. In that same vein, my tip number 2 is understand your limits. So this is caution with the guidebook, so ensuring that you know the level that the guidebook is working towards. This might be to do with ability, skill, speed. It's also worth being cautious and being generous with your time. I particularly like using the OS app to plot out my route, because I feel that this gives an accurate indication of how long it's going to take me, and I can change my speed depending on how fast I'm going to be on the day. So if I'm carrying a heavy backpack, I can reduce the speed, and that will give me a good indication. And sometimes I definitely get a bit overly optimistic and want to sort of go further and think I can take it on, but actually once I've plotted it out and looked at the time, I'm looking at a route that's 8 hours and I really only had 5. So to sort of reel it back in and work towards a route that's attainable and not bite off more than I can chew. Once I have plotted out my route and I've got my time that it's going to take me, I do also add buffers to that as well. So ensuring that if for maybe some reason you're not going as fast or slow as you thought you might be going, ensuring that you've got a generous amount of buffers, whether this is to make sure that you get back before dark, or whether it's just to ensure that you're trying to reach a certain point, maybe somebody's picking you up, or you're trying to get public transport back home. So my third and final tip is to have a contingency plan or maybe some escape routes. This might only be relevant if you're planning a route of considerable length, or maybe it's gaining a certain amount of altitude, and it's a good way of practicing if you're gaining confidence with your route planning skills, to know that if the weather changes or a situation occurs that you no longer feel that you can continue on that same route, there are possibilities to come back on yourself, potentially go a different way. I had to have a contingency plan recently when I was climbing in Buttermere, and I had originally planned to start from Buttermere, climb up Scarth Gap and go across High Crag, High Stile and Red Pike and back down towards Buttermere. But as we got further up, the wind started to get quite strong, and I didn't feel comfortable going up to Red Pike, High Crag and High Stile, because once I was up there, I knew that I was up there, and it is possible to come down, but it wasn't necessarily as easy. So at that point, I decided to go up Haystacks instead. So rather than go up the right hand side when you get to the crossroads, decided to go up the left hand side towards Haystacks. and this was a really good decision because it's considerably smaller, and it's the path is very well established, and I had done it before and just knew that it was something that I felt, given the weather conditions, it was something that I felt more comfortable doing. Tip about having a contingency plan also covers your transportation to get to your walk. Whether you've taken public transport and you need to be mindful of the last bus or train that will be running that allows you to get back. I know particularly in that northwestern area of the Fells, the 77 and the 77A stop running around 7 o'clock, 10 to 7ish, so it is important if you set off later or you've done a longer walk that you have that in mind. It also, if you've driven there, includes checking what parking is available and whether you will need to pay for your parking. In the Lake District, the parking can range between £3 to £10 a day depending on where you're parking, and it can often be cash only. So having that ready, having done that research when you're part of your route planning to ensure that you're going to be getting back in a timely manner and doesn't end up dismantling any hopes of starting the walk at a certain time, or equally, you know, not getting back. In the summer months, it can be really busy, and so, you know, planning a walk that starts at 11 o'clock probably isn't that reasonable if you are driving, and it would probably be recommended to start as early as you possibly can. So these are all things to try and factor in. The bus obviously does really help with that, but sometimes they can run late and early, so it's really worth allowing enough time and ensuring that you've got ways to get back. So I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video. I will be making a couple more videos shortly on a recent trip to the Lake District where I climbed Great Gable, and we also did another walk in Borrowdale that was incredibly wet. So I look forward to reliving that experience, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. See you soon.